Morning. Hope you guys can hear me. Zoe, why don't you slide on in so you're in frame? Great.
In the frame.
Can I get a thumbs up from somebody if you guys can hear us? Okay, awesome. Thank you. Never know if I'm just talking into the void here.
Just muted.
Just
yapping.
muted. Yeah, exactly.
I had to give a PowerPoint presentation at work the other day, and I presented like two whole, because like I couldn't tell that people were like frantically motioning at me that I was muted, and I presented like two whole slides before I realized that nothing was happening.
I'm just pulling up my notes here.
Got Bowie on my feet snuggling.
That's not gonna work. Oh, it's just the computer. Well, cool. So glad to see everybody. I guess we were off last week. We had an amazing group run in Olympic Valley with a handful of athletes.
So awesome to see everyone.
Yeah, it really it's just so fun to do that.
I love meeting other coaches, athletes.
Right? Yeah, it's interesting too to see people who, maybe you see them on the Zoom call or if something comes up, you see them in the email or on the
or
Facebook,
you see them in rad weekend
weekend
updates. I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah.
we've never met, but I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. We don't have a solid date yet, but I think in maybe early October or late September, we're going to do another meetup, but it's going to be in Colorado. Dates to be announced, but hopefully we can get some people together again, because I think, at least for me as a coach, it really makes sometimes isn't a linear process. It's like a celebration for me.
And I think
I really enjoy that.
We really emphasize being able to take connections, fitness, relationships into the real world, rather than just being in people's DMs.
Yeah, exactly. Not just being on the logs all the time. We had one of my athletes drove 3 hours to be at the run, and we only ran for 35 minutes. Because we had, you and Mike were racing, so we had to keep it pretty chill for you guys, but it was just so awesome.
Yeah, I think that's something that for me, I didn't always have super positive experiences on teams growing up, and I never really felt like I fit in or necessarily was a part of something. So now for me as an adult, it's so meaningful to really have a sense of belonging in an athletic context, right? When I run with our athletes, I'm this is a freaking legit team. We've got our shirts, we're rolling mad deep, taking up the whole bike path in Olympic Valley. We're a team, and that's really freaking cool.
It's super awesome. I can't wait for our new hats to come in. Unfortunately, they're a month late. Supply chain stuff, but I think everyone's going to be really psyched on those too. To complete the uniform. We'll have to get some shorts. Cool. Well, I think I wanted to spend the majority of this call kind of talking about Western states and just some things that we, as coaches saw out there taking away from the experience. It was a very full weekend. I am not recovered yet, 100%. I am so tired still from the whole experience. I can't imagine how you're feeling, Zoe, although you seem to always perk up a lot faster than I do. But it was a full weekend. I think there's a lot to kind of chat about and some really great takeaways for athletes. And then, hopefully we can kind of segue a little bit into, some other stuff that we're seeing out there, broader strokes, things like that. Talking about getting vulnerable on race day and really putting yourself out there. And maybe even having time for this one question that I think we all think about, but how long should you wait after a big race to sign up for the next one? So hopefully some of this conversation will be illuminating for you guys. I know I haven't even fully formed all of my kind of thoughts around this. So it'll be interesting to kind of wrap with the other coaches. And it's cool. Mike's coming on the call also. Mike is a total boss. He finished the race in 22 hours and 52 minutes, which is just like absolutely incredible. Really a great result for Mike. What's up, Mike? Good to see you. Good morning. Thanks for being on the call.
I saw Mike at mile 80 and he looked legit as fresh as he does right now. It was pretty aggravating. Just smiling away, taking care of his feet, rocking it.
I was just
Mike,
hoping to run with you,
power
Zoe.
hiked out of that aid station.
Like a boss. Yeah.
I mean, and that's kind of like, that was the Green Gate aid station. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the course, but for a lot of people who are on, like 20 to 24 hour track, it's just starting to kind of get dark. Like it's been dark for maybe half an hour, and you're on like a pretty long sustainable climb before it becomes runnable again. And coming out of that aid station, yeah, Mike was just hiking like a boss. You could tell that he'd put in the training and was ready to close in those last 20 miles.
Yeah, he seemed really like measured and in control.
Yeah.
He was running the game. The race was not running Mike.
Oh man. Well, before we get into, I did want to talk a little bit about Mike's training because I think it's really illustrative for a lot of you guys out there who I know we have athletes running races like TDS coming up. We have athletes who are running Leadville 100 and other like just these big events with a lot of hype around them, really tough courses. And I think looking a little bit at Mike's training is really helpful for athletes because it's not always, these results and the outcomes they're not a given, right? There are a lot of small steps that the athlete has to put into play every single day to just get to that start line with the chance of finishing, with the ability to like give it their best shot. And so, I think illustrating and highlighting some of the stuff that Mike did to prepare is super important. Well, let's just get into it right now since we're kind of on that track and Mike popped in. But some cool things that I just want to point out. One, Mike worked a lot on adapting and getting prepared for the heat, which is super, super important. Like Mike's from Canada.
He lives in Canada,
yeah,
by the way.
He's not from a super hot part of North America. It's pretty chilly up there. I think maybe, don't quote me on this, Mike, but maybe like your warmest runs were like in the mid 80s Fahrenheit. It wasn't like we weren't pushing 100-degree runs, not nearly the temps that he was going to see on race day. But what we did was we did a hot bath immersion protocol at home at Mike's house. His bathtub gets just hot enough for there to be a training stimulus there, a training stress. And Mike was like popping into his bath like directly after runs for like 10, 15 minutes at a time. And that was helping to build his tolerance, build blood plasma, blood volume, and get him prepared, not only for the heat, but that also helps with altitude as well. And so I think that was very successful. But again, like that's not an easy thing to do. Like Mike's got a full-time job. He works his ass off every single day. And just having to spend an extra 15 minutes doing that, plus prepping the bath, all that stuff, hydrating after the bath, that's not easy. So I'm just going to give Mike like some serious kudos there for putting in that extra work. The other like little extra that Mike was doing was his strength work, really making sure to get in those single leg step ups and stuff like that. That like right there, that base of strength, developing those slow twitch muscle fibers, that's what allows you to still be power hiking well out of Green Gate at mile 80 in a tough ultra after being in the heat all day. Like without that really important element, it's easy for a runner to kind of like fall apart out there. These races are just so demanding. And I think the Western States course is particularly interesting because it's like three kind of like mini ultras packed into one.
It's like three totally different 50Ks.
Yeah. You want to talk a little bit just about like what the course kind of looks like?
Yeah, it's such a cool course. So you start with like 30 miles in the Alpine. So like really classic, like technical Alpine running. We were lucky this year there wasn't any snow, which was, I mean, I was honestly rooting for snow because I figured it would slow some people down more than me. But it was clear. Just like classic, kind of similar to Colorado style Alpine, like mountain running. And then you get some like maybe after, so like not quite 50K of it, a little before 50K, it kind of turns into some like subalpine fire roads. So you're still like definitely pretty high up. You're definitely at like 7,000 feet, but it becomes less technical, a little less exposed. And then you kind of roll from right around, so like Robinson Flat to Last Chance, you just get some really nice fire roads, some gentle downhills, not super technical. And then you get 20 miles ish of canyons, which is really cool, like super steep. Super steep, switchbacky, hot canyons. And I think the dynamic of canyons is interesting because I feel like so often in Colorado, you think of climbs as like going up and over a summit rather than down into something and then crawling back out. And I thought that's a really cool, fun dynamic. Then after the canyons, you get a little more, some more chill miles down into Forest Hill. And then after Forest Hill, it's like pretty smooth sailing. You get like 40 miles of pretty chill California single track. So like you get three totally different race dynamics, like Alpine running, reverse mountain running, and then like flatter, faster single track. And I think that like the thing that for me makes that course so appealing is how distinctly different the segments are and how each successive segment, the way it's in conversation with the previous segments, make a really unique challenge in a way that's like really, really appealing. It reminds me of when we were training for Telluride Mountain Run. A big thing we were focused on was being able to do runs where you could go pound your quads, go do 10,000 feet of vert and still run fast on flat trail. Because if you just flay your legs, you're not going to be able to make hay on those easier bits of the trail. So having the fitness and having the resilience to like bear the brunt of the more technical and challenging bits of the course and still run when the course gets runnable at like a pretty devilishly inconvenient part of the day is such an exciting and unique challenge.
Totally. And gosh, I mean, it was just so epic to watch people kind of go through those, different stages of the race. And I think like the crew points are really like kind of strategically like lined up. So you kind of like get to see athletes either starting or finishing one of those like different iterations of the course. I
would say like if you're at Robinson Flat, Michigan Bluff or Forest Hill, and then anywhere else along the course.
Yeah, totally. And those like interesting, like very race specific demands, I think is another thing that, Mike was focused a lot on in his training. In particular, 5 weeks out from the race, we did a huge boot camp weekend where Mike ran a 50K on pretty steep trails. He racked up like almost 6,000 feet of climbing on Saturday. And then, the next day he did a fast 20 miler with almost like 600 feet of vert. So it was like one day with a little bit more power hiking, a lot more climbing, followed up by a day with more turnover. So you're kind of getting like both of those worlds. You're getting like the metabolic adaptations, being a little bit, maybe not having quite full glycogen stores going into that 20 miler, and then asking your legs to like really still turn over and do well. Really kind of like, I would say, simulated what it would be like to deal with some of those race day demands. I think like beyond like getting the training done, another thing that I really want to mention about Mike's training is Mike was super smart and very self-aware, built a lot of self-awareness during this process. getting down towards the end of his training, things you're putting on that much volume, things can get a little scary. There's a risk for injury, and being really smart. And Mike did this super well. He knew when to back off. He knew when to take an extra rest day or two, even if that meant like missing a back-to-back long run, and not being overly concerned about like missing that one run, but being like, I've put in all this work. It's going to be advantageous for me to not take a risk right now. Like most likely, if I do take a risk and it plays out, like, is it really going to be worth it? Kind of trying to weigh everything in a very pragmatic and self-aware way. I think it's just, I don't quite have the vocabulary to I haven't fully digested all of that, but like the importance of making those strong decisions when leading up to a big race. Often, like, I will see as a coach, athletes go through these big 12 to 16 week builds for a big race, like a 100-miler. They get really close to the end, but the totality of that work is really starting to add up. Maybe there's some like life stress happening. There's some work stuff going on, like was for Mike. And then that athlete pushes through feeling a little niggle or feeling a little bit of a fatigue hole kind of developing. And then that really compromises them getting to that start line. Sometimes they don't get to the start line. So it's really important, guys, like listen to your bodies. When you put in that much work, that work doesn't go away when you've taken an extra rest day or two. In fact, that extra rest day often is really helpful for adaptation, and then you can level up on that. Super, super great stuff. Yeah, Mike, we're really freaking proud of you. So great work, man.
Mike.
I want to kind of maybe talk a little bit about some of the other takeaways that I saw just from like being on the course all day long, getting to see all of the athletes out there. Particularly like I thought it was really interesting to watch the front runners in the race. Seeing a few of my friends out there really pushing themselves was super, super cool. I guess like the first thing I noticed was how hard the elite runners were running early in the race. I think in general, a lot of people were pretty chill up the escarpment. If you guys are familiar with the race, it starts at the bottom of, I don't know what they've renamed.
Palisades
Tahoe, and they climb to the top, and it's a pretty steep climb.
So like the first few miles of the race have a 2,500 foot climb.
Yeah.
Which is pretty
significant.
Unique. Yeah. But it's also like, as long as you don't be a dipshit, it's fine.
Right. And I thought it was really interesting to see. So the first kind of view of the race I got to see outside of the live feed was at mile 30, and seeing the athletes run through that aid station, just how fast they were moving, just how much effort they were putting into each stride was kind of blew me away. I was thinking people would be maybe a little bit more visibly relaxed, especially the elites. But to see that they were really pushing themselves from the very first moment, and kind of putting themselves out there a little bit, I think, knowing that it was a competitive race.
Yeah, I mean,
was very cool.
That's definitely what, like, when you watch golden ticket races in Western states now, like these really kind of tip of the spear ultras, you definitely see the pro and elite competitors efforting harder. Like, it is a pretty different strategy, right? And so like in this, obviously like everyone should run their own race, but like if your goal is to, get a golden ticket or win Western states, you have to pace those events really radically differently than like how I would run that race.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't run it that way either. I don't have the confidence to run that hard that early. Maybe I can get there, aspiring to get there. But that's definitely something I noticed. But on the other side of that, I know like Mike paced himself really well. You were pacing yourself really well. Friends of ours, people that we knew, were also kind of like Drew Holloman. He was relaxed going into that first eight. Like he hiked up the hill. He ended up finishing, I think, like fifth.
Yeah.
And so like not everybody was going hard, but most, like a lot of people, 50% of those elites were like visibly, like Jeff, he looked like he was going hard. Our friend who did really well, he looked like he was going pretty freaking hard. But on the other side of that, there's always a strategy of like starting slow and letting the race evolve. I know I am a big proponent of this kind of racing style, have talked about it a lot. We did see some pretty successful like performances out there with that strategy as well. I don't think that strategy played out as a winning strategy out there, but it's definitely a top 10 and even a top 5, I think, strategy. Just in kind of like,
I would say it puts you in the back half of the top 10. I think if you want to go top 5 at that event, you have to be jockeying right out the gate.
Yeah.
You have to be maintaining. But like, again, like this is, you know, maybe, yeah, I think that, and again, like,
well, nobody drops.
When no one drops, yeah. And there weren't a ton of blowups at the front of the pack this year.
No.
Which is rare. I was expecting to see a lot more on both sides, particularly with the M1 and F1 bibs out of play. So it was actually really interesting to see people pace aggressively, but well within their capacity. Like there wasn't carnage, like there, you know, especially like in the men's top 10, usually whoever's in the top 7 going into Robinson Flat, like all those guys are done by the canyons.
Yeah.
Like a lot of those guys end up DNFing at Forest Hill. And yeah, I think you're seeing people are still running aggressively, but getting smarter. And that's really cool to see. And I think it's really cool, especially to see women start to get closer to kind of the like Jim Walmsley-esque strategy of like Ruth Croft led the race from step 1, you know, never wavered. Love to see it. I love to see women pacing aggressively. I feel like there's sometimes been a perception that the women's race or like that women's ultras are like a race of attrition and that they're less competitive. So seeing women adopt these aggressive, highly competitive racing strategies and be very successful and like a lot of times be more successful than the men is super, super exciting. I think that brings a really cool dynamic to the race. And, you know, again, like as a huge fan of the women's race, that's what you really want to see is, you know, like we as women know that we're putting it out there. And I think that putting it out there in a way that men understand and can relate to helps bring more folks into how wonderful the women's side of the sport is.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective and just what I saw out there, it looks like the women were giving it they were bringing the heat from the beginning, you know, like
no one was like,
no effort gap.
Yes.
You know, like some were starting a little bit more relaxed, but again, like those top like 5-6 runners through mile 30, like we're definitely pushing the pace. And I think they're pushing potential or attempting to.
They were riding that line.
Yeah, which is, I think, like a risky strategy, but you know, when you're confident, when you do it the right way, it plays out. You know, you can't not take a little bit of risk out there. Again, like starting slow and aiming to finish feeling really good. Like Leah Yingling ran like, I guess, like the fastest like back half of the race like in history.
She closed super hard.
Yeah, so that's a risky strategy as well. But again, like if that's what you're confident with, that's what plays out well for you. Going for it in that way, I think, is hugely important.
She was running like in the top 20 for a lot of the race. Yeah. So she, and I think that I mean, she finished first American. Yeah. So like, yeah, it's really cool to see. I mean, I'm just like a huge fan of Leah. Like as a mountain runner, I feel like I was following in her footsteps a lot. So it was really cool to see her. Like, I mean, she ran a great first half of the race, and it seems like on paper, that would be the part of the race that would appeal most to her strengths. And then she dropped the freaking hammer on the flat part of the course too, which is really cool to see.
So awesome.
Like she ran strong and smart and closed hard, just executed like a perfect race.
Yeah. And I think like what I want athletes to really take away from just hearing what we've been talking about here with like race strategy is know thyself, develop your self-awareness.
Yeah.
The only way you can do that is through training in racing over many,
Spend a lot of
many
time
years.
through effing up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's inherent in the process, right? Like that's part of training and racing. You're going to have training days where you're pushing it. And like a lot of these athletes, they push their training days in a similar way as they push their races. And that's how they build that confidence. And so, there's going to be times where you go out a little too hard on a long run and you pay for it. And, instead of making that a big deal, make that just a part of the process. There's going to be times where you go out and race and you go out a little too hot in the beginning. And this applies at every level of the sport, but you go out, oh, that was a little too hot for where I was at today. And instead of making that a big deal, make it a part of the process. Make that a learning opportunity. That's your choice. You have the choice to do that. You have the choice to linger on it and make it a referendum on the kind of athlete you are, or you have the choice to make it a learning opportunity. And, these athletes are great problem solvers. They're great at turning adversity into learning opportunities. That's why they're so successful. I thought something that was so freaking cool was the live feed and how much more prevalent the live feeds are becoming in the sport. I think it's really changing things. So like when we were driving, we had like a roughly 2.5 hour drive from Olympic Village to the first crewing location. And we were able to stream the entire race in the car. And I was driving, so I didn't really watch too much, but I listened to the commentators, and everybody else in our crew car was able to like keep track of the race and kind of like see what people were looking like. And it really provided like this up close and personal, just kind of view of what was going on out there. And I think like for athletes at home, I hope all of you guys had the chance to tune in to that live feed, because just getting to see what it's like out there at the aid stations, at the top of the escarpment, like along the trails with the front runners, I think gives like this amazing kind of window seat into what these races are like. It's very aspirational, at least to me.
Yeah.
And super, super cool.
Yeah, I think it really brings people into the sport and helps like, break it down for people who are just getting into it. And it just treats it like the like discipline it is. I think again, like there's been sometimes a perception that like ultra running or trail running is what you do if you just like miss the OTQ a few too many times and get bored of the roads. And like, this is a specific, super professionalized discipline, and treating it as such is so exciting to me. Like, this is not a place where mediocrity thrives. This is a place where people go to be freaking excellent, and being able to treat it that way, I think is so good for everyone that gets sucked into the orbit. And I feel like I really see my values represented in that. And I was never someone that really loved watching sports growing up. Like, I get so bored, but I'll watch like 20 hours of an ultra, no freaking problem.
Yeah.
I watch like, we'll like be at a restaurant and you're watching baseball and you're like, oh my God, this guy's just been scratching his balls for like 30 minutes, but I'll watch someone in an aid station all day, every day.
I think it's particularly interesting, because we're all engaged in this at various levels. We're all at various stages of our running journeys, and kind of getting, again, that window seat into like what the best in the world are doing can be really illuminating. You can pick up on things that you wouldn't have otherwise seen. You don't get to be the best in the world, without having like a lot of great like tips and tricks and things like that, that really play out well. I mean, we certainly learned a lot about managing the heat and problem solving out there during the race. And this is something that I saw like basically like every athlete go through at those aid stations, was just like a series of different kind of like problem solving, externalizing, talking with their crew, really working through things. A lot of people at the front of the race, even the guys who are like really pushing pace, like Adam, he really took his time during those aid stations to talk to his crew, looked very relaxed, like brought the energy down. Like there is a lot of stoke and hype at that race, especially when you go into an aid station and there's 100+ people there crewing and spectating, it's easy to be elevated, swept up in it, and forget a bunch of things that you need. And Zoe, you did a great job of this too. It's just like just bringing it down, focusing on communication, and working through those things to make sure that you've got everything you need for that next stage of the race. At every level of the sport, if you forget something, it can like even one thing can really turn a good day into a bad day. So taking that extra time is really important. That's certainly something that I'm going to take away as I get ready for CCC, which is going to definitely demand some extended stops and aid stations and things like that.
With the challenge of European aid stations are very different.
Yeah, well, that's why hopefully you'll be there. So I don't have to eat salami.
We're going to have to check an entire carry-on of Morton.
Oh, God.
It's going to be that or charcuterie. There's no in between.
I'm not ready to GI adapt to salamis and cured meats because that's what got me. That's a whole other story. Yeah.
Endurance meats.
So, gosh, we digress a little bit here, but this is a fun conversation. Yeah, slowing it down, guys, like really slow it down at your next race. When
on the other hand, I think there are some folks that need to be more efficient going into aid stations. So I always, before I go into an aid station, I know exactly what orders I'm going to give my crew. And I use those opportunities to really mentally re-engage with what's going on. Because if you just like go in and you let shit happen to you, you're no longer in charge of the day. And I think really mentally, it's important to signal to yourself, like, I'm still running this show. So I go in, I'm like, I want ice here, not there. Here's where I'm feeling. Here's what's different. Here's what I just got in the aid station. Here's what's working for me, and really try to clearly communicate with my crew. Like, I don't want to just come into the aid station. I don't want to just come into the aid station and be like, oh, this, maybe I could try that. This sounds good. Like I don't enter that aid station until I have a plan. Because otherwise you see people kind of like putzing around. Maybe I'll change shoes. Like if you need to think about what you need, you should have been doing that way outside of the aid station. I think particularly if you're doing a really long ultra, you have drop bags, like you just don't want to be, you want to be efficient and in charge at aid stations without rushing. So
totally. And I think like that's a good process oriented goal for athletes to think about, is like when you're, maybe a mile out from that next crew spot or that aid station, that's when like that internal dialogue should start kicking in. Okay, what do I like? A little bit of self-evaluation. How am I feeling? How are the legs? Have I gotten enough sodium and electrolytes in? Have I been drinking well? Like, how's my fueling? Is there some chafing going on? Maybe a blister? Like, what do I need to address? And what do I not need to address? That way I can be as efficient as possible. When you go into an aid station and you don't know what you need, that's not great for your crew. That indecisiveness wastes time. But on the other hand, too, that can also create an elevated situation where things start to like spin out of control mentally. Oh, I don't know what I need. What should I do? All of that kind of stuff. So we really want to take that step back. Great process-oriented goal, again, for everybody is like, if you're a mile and a half out from that aid, start working through and thinking ahead about what you're going to need. So then you can like really clearly ask for those things, whether it's from the volunteers or from your crew, whether you're grabbing it from your drop bag, whatever that, whatever it is there, that you have kind of like that strong, very direct idea of what you need. You can get in and get out without like wasting too much time. The other thing that's really cool about Western States is it's so hot. This is like one of the hottest years ever. Athletes at every level were taking the time to cool themselves off. So I do want to take just a second to talk a little bit about, some of those like cooling methods that athletes were using out there. Some of the things, can you not do that? I hate squeaker toys. Sorry. So I wonder if Kylie has some things here just about like metabolically what's going on when you cool the system down. But something I noticed is every single athlete at every level was utilizing ice bandanas, ice vests, putting ice like in their running vests, like filling their pockets with ice, filling their sleeves with
Shorts,
ice,
ice in the shorts.
everything, like ice in the shorts. They're running very saturated by cold water and ice. But I think what's happening there is keeping the body cool is allowing athletes to push harder in the heat. It's allowing them to digest their calories better. And ultimately it's like really keeping them from, these like epic like heat bonks that I think sometimes you've seen in the past at Western States where, some of these methods weren't like used as well. And this is definitely something that's been coming. It's been like up and coming over the last couple of years. I think like Zoe, you mentioned like you had heard of a few people using ice vests last year, and now like
Tyler Green
everyone
had an ice vest at Forest Hill. And I remember I wrote about it in Trail Runner, and I got so many emails about that article. People were like, what kind of vest was it? How was he using it? Like people were really interested because I don't think people had really seen that before. And then this year, I mean, our coach, like he straight up was like, get yourself an ice vest. Here's where to use it. And that was pretty helpful.
Yeah, just putting it on you. Also a Tyler Green thing that I picked up on was the ice towel hood to give athletes shade, and you just put it like right over someone's head when they're in the aid station, and that water just kind of cools down on the neck and like really like cools the head downwards and provides like, I don't know, just like a moment out of the sun, because it's a really exposed course. There's not a lot of opportunity for shade. And then underneath that like towel canopy is the ice vest, and having a Coca-Cola or whatever it is, like getting extra fluids and like getting the vest ready to go.
Yeah.
Pretty sweet. Kylie, I don't know if you can like read us in a little bit on kind of the nutritional side to this, where, when the body gets hot, the core temperature goes up, it becomes harder to digest. What exactly is happening there? What happens when we then cool the system back down?
I don't know if I can speak to the full metabolic process that's going on. It's not something that like is my area of expertise or anything, but when you get hot, there is going to be more blood kind of diverted away from the gut. So that's going to make digestion a little bit more difficult. So it makes people not have as much of an appetite too. So thinking about that when you're planning out your fuel plan is really important, because I think having like a backup option or two is really something good to consider. And then I always have athletes do like savory options as well, just so that they have some mix up if they get sick of sweet things. And then always, people always ask about the liquid nutrition, like should I have a hydration mix or not, that has calories in it. And so, this would be a place where if you had one, it could be an advantage, because if you can't take down any kind of solids, that would be helpful, getting in the liquid piece. And then if you can take in like cool, really cool liquids, that can help just like kind of cool down the core a little bit. That's even like a tip if you're going out for in hot temperatures, like taking down a really cold drink beforehand can actually like lower the core temperature to get you started on the run a little bit cooler. So that's something to consider. And then some athletes like want their hydration mix to kind of have ice in it or something. So talking maybe with your crew as to like what you would prefer at certain points, if you would like to have ice or like a really cold beverage or not, is something I would suggest chatting with people on. Consideration in the heat too of obviously your sodium and electrolytes. We've talked about that a lot before, but making sure that you do have that kind of those fluid losses dialed. And then considering like how much sodium am I actually going to be losing. However, I will say I worked with someone the other day that had done a race and it didn't go as well as they wanted. And we chatted about what they did, and we think they actually took in too much sodium. So you do want to be careful with the amount that you're using, because for some people that don't lose a ton of sodium in their sweat, that can push you over the edge, and it's the same symptoms as if you're not consuming enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where there can be some confusion, right? Like if you don't know exactly how much you need, and you're guessing the whole time and you're not keeping good track of things, then you're just throwing a lot of uneducated guesses out there in the problem solving process when you start to like have those symptoms. But Kylie just gave like a really great, like broad strokes kind of analysis of why you want to keep your core cool. And I think this applies to everybody who's listening to this call. You don't have to be a front runner at Western States to use an ice vest or to put ice in your running vest, in your sleeves, to cool yourself off at a hot race. Like if you're somebody who runs hot, like I'm one of those people. If you're out in exposed terrain, you're running and you stop and you've got an ice option, your crew has ice, the race has ice, use it. It like really, really, really does help. Another thing that I personally like to use, Zoe was using this during the race and so are other athletes, is a flask that's maybe like 3/4 filled with ice and the rest water, and it melts while you're out there and you can spray yourself down with that cool water.
I had basically 2 flasks that were for hydration, and then I just had a splashing flask, like a recreational flask.
It works. I mean,
no, it's so great.
That's definitely
like, especially because I was wearing arm sleeves, like those would dry. Like I was really feeling how effective having ice on the pulse points of my arms was, and then keeping those wet was really, really great for cooling. I felt like that was something I only practiced one time in training, and it wasn't necessarily hot enough for me to really like get the full effect of it. And that was something I was really, really loving and felt great about.
That's awesome.
I was gonna answer that question, TJ. That was
please, Kylie, that'd be great.
Just since it'll kind of flow well, but usually I say months in advance. First off, not weeks in advance for practicing nutrition. But then also, and the question, I guess, I don't know if this show, I guess people on the podcast can't hear what the question was. It says, I know it's been said to practice your nutrition for your race many weeks in advance, but how often and how far out from the race should we practice alternate options? So I usually say when you're building your fueling plan, make sure that you have alternate options built into the plan so that you're actually practicing that as part of the plan. Like make maybe a chart that has your options on it. And then whenever you're in the race, you can think about where you want to have certain like baggies of whatever food and hydration mix, etc. But you might not actually want that thing at that place or at that station or stop. So having the alternate or alternates available can sometimes give you a second option there. And I would practice it like as part of that months out process to make sure that it's working. So I usually say like having for long ultras, couple like 3 or 4 different maybe combinations of hydration mix or water electrolyte gel or whatever it is, and giving yourself like 3 to 4 different hypothetical options.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kylie, you say it so well. Practice early. If you're 12 weeks out from your event, start practicing. If you're 2 weeks from your event and you haven't practiced anything, you're like, it's too late. Mike, another shout out to Mike. Mike really worked on his nutrition leading up to this race. He was pushing 400 calories an hour in the heat on all of his long runs leading up to the race. And guess what? He was getting in 400 calories an hour during Western States. Like, that's ridiculous. That takes so much practice and dedication. But if you do that, it will pay off for you down the road. So let's all do like Mike this weekend and practice our race day fueling.
I feel like the Mike plan is to eat a lot and then hang out in the bath. And that is absolutely my plan this weekend. Before and after Western States, the program is to eat a shit ton and then take hot baths.
You can eat some pad thai in the bathtub.
Yeah, this is the microcosm secret to recovery.
All right, let's move on. We got a couple more things to hit today. I want to open this up to the other, to you again, Kylie or Kristen, or if Sarah, when she pops back on. But how can we kind of like get to that place where we are confident to go for it on race day? How can we get vulnerable and put ourselves out there knowing that the outcomes are uncertain? We might fail in that process. The day might not go the way we want. How can we do that? It seems like for me, it's like almost an abstract concept. Like, I'm not even sure. Who wants to take a stab at this first?
I can give a little mental health perspective, or just that piece of it. Like, I think, when you think about, well, how can I put myself out there if I'm afraid of failing? I think explore what the fear of failing is. That's different for everybody, right? So are you afraid what other people might think? Are you afraid of hard work? Like, what is it you're afraid of? And then exploring, so spending some time with then like those fears, and really letting yourself, spend some time with like what it might feel like to disappoint somebody, or like learn that people aren't going to be disappointed in you if you shoot for the moon and miss, is it going to be hard work? Yes, it is going to be hard work. So, there is some legitimacy to that fear, but then explore that. Like, is that something you need to be afraid of? Is hard work a threat to you, or is it actually a step towards success? So I think really like digging deep in that self-awareness piece and really exploring like, what is it you're afraid of when you say you're afraid of?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I think that is just awesome. That honestly, it can be really tough to want to put yourself out there. The fear of failure, also like the fear of how hard it's going to feel to push yourself, is really tough. Like, it's definitely something that I'm scared of. Like, I was like looking at some of the front runners at Western States and being like, whoa, do I even know what it feels like to like push that hard at a race? Like, I'm not sure. Like, that is just like this level of vulnerability that maybe I'm not even like ready for, like, or I'm scared of, like, what happens if I blow up? And so something that I've like been thinking about, because I've got some big races coming up, is like, what would my inner coach kind of tell me in those moments of like self-doubt? It's like, well, I'm going to tell myself like, it's okay to fail. It's okay to come up short. It's okay to be scared. If you don't have the desired outcome that you want, that's a learning opportunity. Like, for me, like, to give me confidence, I have to like look at what these potential outcomes are, visualize the ones to where things aren't going right, and then really instill confidence in myself through like the proper positive self-talk. And I think, like reframing it as almost like there's maybe going to be a DNF can be really helpful. Like, I do couple that also with a lot of visualization of me running the race that I want to race, running successfully, responding to adversity in higher ways that I think will help me work towards my goals. And I do visualize myself using process-oriented goals as well, but being on the other side of things too, and like not expecting it all to go right. If it gets hard and I feel like I might not get what I want to get out of this, or gosh, maybe I'm going to maybe I'm going too hard, like I'm not gonna be able to finish, what are those voices that I can bring in, like, that can help me maybe move through that or give me some kind of peace in those moments. It's like, people still love you no matter what this result is. Like, you're still the same athlete you always were, same person you always were, like that kind of stuff, which sometimes when you're going hard and the result is in question, like that performance outcome is in question, that like identity kind of stuff can work its way into the inner dialogue, at least for me. So having like those like almost like affirmations can be really helpful. Yeah, we'd love to hear from the rest of you guys.
Something I was thinking of was that if the outcome was guaranteed, like I nailed my training, I didn't miss a mile, like I nailed it to the T, and that doesn't guarantee you anything. Like, literally I executed like I didn't miss a 20-second hill stride. My training, I don't believe in perfection, but my training was getting very, like it was what my coach had prescribed. And didn't get the outcome I wanted, And I think that like, I always tell myself that if it feels easy and if the outcome is guaranteed, then you don't actually get the opportunity to be brave. And one of my core values is being brave and courageous. And if you knew, well, if I execute perfect training, then I'll have this result, that's not very brave. That's just algebra, So like being able to have that space to be brave and to try to apply your best training to a big challenge is exciting. Even again, like it's not that fun when you fall short of your expectations and what you've worked for, but that's the only way to be brave.
And to sometimes level up. Too.
And to level up, yeah.
So I think like, gosh, the idea of just trying to be really brave, courageous out there is integral.
Yeah.
In getting
and like
vulnerable.
if you let your foot off the gas, that's also not like, for me, I always think of this like I feel like an emotional slipstream where there's just like the perfect amount of resistance. Like I'm not going so hard that I'm like self-sabotaging and I'm not taking my foot off the gas to the point where I'm not being vulnerable. I'm right in that space where everything is possible, but you absolutely have to work for it and nothing is guaranteed.
I want to be right in that
slipstream
pocket next weekend. Yeah. Kristen, Kylie, what are your thoughts? What are your go-tos? I know, Kristen, you hadn't raced in a while. You went out and raced at Broken Arrow. What was that like?
Just like the most competitive.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
Really hard.
That was really interesting. That was definitely a lesson in humility and vulnerability for me, because the last time I did the 26K, I was in the top 10. I like felt really strong. And I think coming off of this like really serious back injury where I was like, do I need surgery? Will I ever be able to run again? It hurt to walk most days. I fell off the treadmill once because there were like electric shooting pains down my back through my leg to my foot, and actually like who falls off a treadmill while walking? So I was really worried that I wouldn't be able to bounce back. I wouldn't be able to compete the way that I used to or better than I used to. And had like a really close friend of mine who was doing, two really close friends of mine that were doing the Triple Crown. And they were kind of like, hey, like come out, let's do this. We're not like racing, and they're like pro athletes. And so that made me feel a little bit more comfortable, but it was interesting to be a mid to back of the packer because the race was so stacked. So in the vertical kilometer, coming in 40th or 41st woman was just mind blowing to me. And knowing that like Kat Bradley was 5 seconds in front of me, it was just like, okay, like putting this into context a little bit, And then with the 26K, all of the action was happening at the front of the race. I was just out there to get like, I don't even know if I would call it a confidence boost. It was definitely a test run to see what my back could handle with the ups and the downs. Because I am racing OCC in August and there's 12,000 feet of climbing. And so it's just, I really wanted to be sure what I could handle. So kind of setting aside my ego and setting aside my expectations for where I, my stretch goals of where I wanted to be or would have loved to be in those moments, it was really helpful. It connected me to the community. I got to meet some of our athletes. It was a really beautiful experience because I got to take the whole thing in instead of being very stressed and high anxiety about executing the perfect race. Because for me in that moment, that didn't exist. I was just out there to reconnect with the community, to reconnect with my body, and to really like reconnect with my mind in the way that you do when you're in a race environment. And so I think in a lot of cases, maybe someone would say, oh, that was a failure, or Kristen had some like back-to-back really bad races, whatever. I don't care. I was just out there because I love to be out there and because my body is finally able to move. And I'm just so grateful to move without pain through the mountains again. So it was a win for me. I'm psyched.
Yeah,
We're
hell
psyched.
yeah. We're psyched for you because I think it takes a big act of bravery. And it is you are being vulnerable by going out there and trying a demanding race, coming back from an injury, all that uncertainty. Will my body hold up? I'm doing the work, but I haven't really put it to the test yet. That's in the same vein as what we're talking about here, and that's an important illustration for all the athletes because, we're all at different levels of the sport. We're all on a similar journey, but on different parts of that journey. Whether or not you're trying to push a race that has like tight cutoffs for you, that's an act of vulnerability. You have to be brave to go out there and push those cutoffs. Whether you're coming back from injury and it's your first race back, it involves the same thing. Like that outcome is uncertain. We don't know what it is. Is my body going to hold up? Am I going to like race, to the finish that I want? Like, will I be in front of those cutoffs? Like whatever the questions are, we don't have the answers for until we actually get out there and start to put one foot in front of the other. Which
Absolutely.
is, this sport is all about actions, which is like one of the reasons why I love it. Like you can't passively sit at home on your couch, you actually have to get out there and do the work. And that just involves like, I don't know, courage, vulnerability, bravery, like all of these things that at Microcosm we hold as like really central values. Yeah, Kylie, I know.
Sorry. So I think I would add to that too, where like, showing up to the starting line of any race is an act of courage, especially, ones that you really care about. And I think showing up for yourself in training when you're unsure is a good way to build confidence. And I think it's important to let go of like the fear of failure, because that's just a launch pad. Like you can fail 7 times and like that 8th time you succeed. And like, there's highs and there are lows, but that without the lows, like you're not going to fully experience and feel all of the feels when you get to those high points. So I would just say like, maybe try to be less afraid of failure, because you're surrounded by a community who's going to love you no matter what. It is not reflective of who you are as a person. It's only an opportunity for you to do more and better yourself and the people around you after that failure. So.
Right. Absolutely. Like if we had another word that wasn't failure, because none of us here on this call view, coming up short of a big goal or DNFing a race as a failure or not starting a race.
Pre-success.
A pre-success. Okay.
It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity
Success
for
next
next time.
Appetizer.
Yeah.
Palate cleanser.
We started a little late, so we'll go over by a couple minutes here just to get this last question in. But before we do that, Kylie, I know you've been working through some health stuff. I don't, know if you've got a unique perspective that you kind of want to bring into this conversation.
I don't know if it's unique, but I think the way that I like to think about it, like during race week, oftentimes I think a lot of us coaches send athletes like race email, like a pre-race email, and have them look back on their training to kind of see that journey, and so trusting that you've put in what you could during that training cycle, and you've had a coach that has supported you, and you've done what you could and asked of yourself during that cycle going into that event. It's kind of like that celebration in a way, and in my mind it's like your way to test yourself, and kind of see the fruits of like all that hard work that you've put in. And even if you come up short, like you had all of that, you put in all of that amazing work and had all of those maybe memories and things that you created throughout that process. So I try to look back on that and go into a race with the confidence in knowing like I did all that I could to get ready for this, and I'm just going to put out there what I can. So that's kind of how I like to look at it, is you, even if you don't have a coach, but we are microcosm coaching, but still like just that work that you put in, and it's that celebration at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that is important to note, if you're an athlete listening to this and you aren't coached by us, reach out, we're here to support you. I think that something that I really saw at Western States and continue to see and just be blown away by is it takes an army to do this stuff. It's all about who you surround yourself with during the process of training and who you surround yourself with on race day. That can really, really help to make the difference. Like for you, Mike, friends and family out there, you had, friends and family out there, Zoe.
Getting to see Mike out there.
Yeah, like extended microcosm family, like out there on race day, like all of that stuff. It really adds up because like, although we're all at different stages of our running journeys, we're all going through the same stuff. We're all working through a lot of the same things, the self-doubt, the uncertainty. We're going through the tough moments in training. We're trying to like garner our strength to like accomplish hard workouts that make us feel like crap because they're so difficult. Like we're all doing that kind of stuff. And just recognizing that process is just a little bit better when you've got support in your corner. Recognizing that too, like the culture of the people that surround you matters a lot and is integral to your success. We talk a lot about excellence here, and excellence isn't, did you finish first? Did you finish your race? Excellence to me is like, did you put the work in? Did you do the best that you can? Did you do the best you could on race day? Did you get vulnerable? Did you act with courage and bravery? Did you act with love and kindness? Like that's what we're talking about here. And so many other people are like, that's excellence. So thank you, Kylie, for bringing that up. I think that a lot of people are going to, really be able to relate to that perspective. All right, just to wrap it up, we're coming off a big Western States weekend. Maybe you're coming off a race as well. A listener is coming off of a race. How long should you wait before signing up for your next big race? I want to hear every coach's opinion on this. I'll start with Kristen.
Ooh, I would say at least 72 hours. Give it 3 days. Really focus first on the race that you just did. Go through what you liked, what you didn't like, what you didn't do exactly well, what you could have done better. And just give yourself time to process before you dive into something else.
Okay. All right. Kylie?
I think it kind of depends on the distance of the race and the experience. Like some people have their full race schedule already dialed, so it wouldn't apply to that. But, if it was like a particularly long race, I think it's important to wait like a week or two at least to decide like, is it smart to do another long race this year, or is it, something I really want to do, and then go from there. So, I mean, if it was like a half marathon, you might be able to kind of make a quicker decision. So I think it depends on the distance and the experience in my mind.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's definitely, like a balanced approach. Zoe?
I think you have to get in, it depends on so many things, but you want to get into that space where your next action isn't a reaction and is a response. It's thoughtful, and it's the start of a new journey. And it's not like a revenge thing. You're not trying to use it to backwards justify things. You're not trying to use it to make sense of a story you're telling yourself. You're using it as a new thing. And I think that that just looks different for everyone.
Yeah, awesome. Let's avoid revenge races.
Revenge races, 0% chance of success.
Yeah, I've seen very few of those go the way that athletes hope.
Yeah.
Again, celebrate what you've just accomplished.
No
I think
rebound
it's
races.
so important. Something that I see is athletes, a few days from their big race, they're already thinking about the race that's going to come after this big race, and they haven't even run the race yet. So take that step back, get present, ground in what you're doing, the goal that you have in front of you. When you've kind of come down from the emotional high that is that race, or work through some of the lows, maybe the race didn't go as well as you wanted, then reach out to your coach, throw some ideas out there, start brainstorming. Again, make sure it's not a reaction to how you feel emotionally, but a response. Make sure that this is, again, the beginning of a new journey. I don't think that there's ever like 72 hours. Yeah, definitely at least 72 hours, 2 weeks, depends on you. I would say just give it time. We all process things at different rates. I know for myself, like I often need like at least a week, if not more, to like process a big race.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Thanks everybody. We will see you all next week. And excited. If you're racing this weekend, good luck. See you soon.